So today we're looking over a rather interesting piece from the Fabian Society. For those of you who don't know what the Fabian Society is, it is one of the, I think it's one of the oldest think tanks, political think tanks in the world, certainly in the UK. I think it's been around for at least like 140 years, and it has been almost the central pillar for providing left policy and advice to leaders, to MPs. It's been around for a while. It is very influential, and it is pretty much almost the pillar to a lot of leftist-built policies. So today we're going to go over an interesting piece because I've said this before, how our voting system at the moment is rigged in a way where many people on the left, the left isn't just one, big monolith. It comes in all sorts of different shades. And this is why I think you often tend to have a lot more arguments on the left than you do tend to see on the right side of politics. And unfortunately, you're seeing this now for a lot of people in the Labour Party who, Starmer got in and then they left. And as I've said before, the only way the left gets into power is through Labour. And I may not like Keir Starmer. I may think that he's doing a lot of things wrong, but that does not stop us from pushing policy, getting left MPs in there. There's a lot of stuff that we can do being in the Labour Party. And I would advocate for anyone who left the Labour Party because Keir Starmer got in, or you're upset of like how Starmer's treated the left in the party. The second you do that, you make the Blairites incredibly happy. So, rejoining the Labour Party will make the Blairites unhappy. But unfortunately, we will have to, like I say, coalesce. And in politics, you've got to play the game if you want to win sometimes. And you've got to play the game that the UK is in. And that is that there are really three factions at play within the UK. You've got the right, the left, and the centre. And compared to a lot of, if people have seen there's been a lot of play for the past couple of years of, quote, fake centrist, of people who've claimed that they're fake centrist, but they're really on the right. Being a centrist in the UK is a thing because it used to be known as the Liberal Democrats. They used to pretty much occupy that centre ground. And they were very, very much, we're going to take some of the economic policies of the Conservatives because we like fiscal responsibilities, but we also like the socially progressive and social safety nets of the left. So we're going to take some of those and just smush them together, and that is essentially really the left in the UK in a very, very quickly described nutshell. So we're going to go and crack on into this article then. And before we do that, please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. And of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me a coffee. And thank you to all those people who do support the channel that way. So, as I said, this comes from the Fabian Society. And the title is The Forgotten Centre. So, since the dramatic collapse of Labour's Red Wall, political analysis has become fixated with the battle to win over the Leave voting, traditionally Labour and working class voters. But Labour, the Conservatives and the mainstream media have offered very little attention to the other trench of British voters who are also questioning their political allegiances. The Liberal Conservative, pro-European, moderate wing of British politics has fallen a long way since its days in the sun under David Cameron and the coalition governments, and now appears to be bordering on political irrelevance as red wall narratives now dominate analyses. So, contrary to their recent media coverage, the hiatus of these voters has just not disappeared. 34% of the UK voters identify with the centre than the left, who is at 42%, or the right at 52%. of politics, and 41% of Conservatives voted to remain in the EU referendum. And by 2019, the Tories managed to win just 19% of the Remain vote. It is generally accepted that since Boris Johnson's rise to power, the Conservative Party and its large core of messaging has largely shifted to the right. This is most clearly demonstrated by its divorce with prominent Liberal and pro-European MPs and ministers, including Philip Hammond, Ken Clarke, Rory Stewart and Amber Rudd. These parliamentarians, alongside former party leaders David Cameron and John Major, have not held back in their criticism of the current government and the Prime Minister. Ken Clarke even described the cabinet as the most right-wing cabinet any Conservative Party has ever produced. The Conservative Party has often successfully sold itself to the centre ground through its image of competent and stable leadership, as well as economic astuteness. However, this reputation will likely be tarnished by its flirtation with a no-deal Brexit and obviously below-par handling of COVID and its authoritarian inclinations highlighted by the illegal prolonging of Parliament and the recent crime and policing bill. Evidently, these disgruntled centrists did not leave the Tories in significant enough numbers to influence the outcome in 2019. However, the true scale of resentment is likely to have been disguised by the Corbyn phenomenon. For many voters, any unease with Boris Johnson and Brexit will have been negated by the fear of Corbyn's radical image and socialist economic proposals. This key anti-Corbyn dynamic was constantly and clearly recorded by pollsters, particularly the Lord Ashcroft polls in the lead-up to the run-up to the 2019 election. And for the ex-Tory centrists who decided to switch allegiances in 2019, the Liberal Democrats were likely seen as a more appropriate and more comfortable vehicle for their unease with Boris and Brexit compared to Corbyn's Labour. However, as Starmer continues to steer Labour's image away from its more radical wing, the Corbyn-shaped roadblock repelling these moderates will perhaps gradually be removed. And this is strongly endorsed by the latest NPR poll, the most detailed electoral analysis since 2019, which showed that 24% of people who voted for the Lib Dems in 2019, almost 1 million people, would now vote Labour. This dwarfs any other movement between major parties recorded in the polls since 2019. And Labour must be mindful of this opportunity to harness more support from the centre ground. This is particularly pertinent in its current context, as the dominance of COVID-19 on politics begin to hopefully wane. Providing space for Starmer to remould the party's image and vision for the country, any political offerings must remain economically credible, internationalist and conceivable. But, most importantly, Labour must be seen as a realistic, governable alternative to the Tories, which is more difficult than it seems when you have been out of power for over a decade. Understandably, of course, regaining the Red Wall support is at the forefront of Labour's consciousness. This can be seen by efforts to reassociate the party with patriotism and the understandable avoidance of any anti-Brexit rhetoric. But this should not be necessarily seen as incompatible with efforts to attract the support of the Liberal centre ground and the recommendations made by Sally Grahamson in her recent Fabian pamphlet to reconnect with Red Wall voters, including the regional development of power and extensive green energy developments, are likely to be popular with Liberals from Bath as they are with Brexiteers from Bassetlaw. This importance of a broad electoral appeal encompassing the central ground was the underlying key point for Joe Biden's victory in the US election. And perhaps it needs reinstating that despite growing fears of populism and authoritarianism, the world's other prominent Western democracies, from France, Germany and Canada, are all ran by moderate leaders and governments that are built on support from the centred ground. If Labour wants to win a majority in 2024, simply regaining the Red Wall voters will not be sufficient. But the Conservatives' desertion of the centre ground simplifies this arduous task of piecing together a successful electoral coalition. So I do agree with this. And I know there are a lot of people who are going to say, oh, well, maybe we have to float back to more Blairite neoliberal policies. No, we don't. There are a lot of policies that we can do, like the devolution one, for example, providing more, power to local area governments and things like that. It will be popular. A green revolution, a massive industrial push towards green technologies and green industries will be incredibly popular, especially if you were to say, okay, this isn't the northern powerhouse, it's now going to be the green northern powerhouse or the north green powerhouse. Call it whatever you will, but that will be an incredibly good vote winner if they go for it. And as I've said before, if you are on the left and you want, even more leftist policies, you are going to have to come to the terms with the fact that we aren't going to take power, especially under the voting system as it is. The first past the post system that we currently are playing in is very, very against any radical shifts, and the desire to create a third party will not work again under it. So what we must do is rejoin with Labour, like I say, as I advocate very often, and push for proportional representation, push for PR, push for a complete reform of our voting and electoral system. And I've said it before, if we did either got the House of Commons and MPs elected by PR, fantastic. That will create a huge change, especially if we can get it into a single transferable vote type situation. Anything but AV will be amazing, and same also applies for the House of Lords, because this is another thing that a lot of people really don't pay attention to. Yeah, it is an incredibly important part of our politics in this country. Reforming the House of Lords so that it is an electable body, especially if we can get it through elected by proportional representation, would be another seismic shift in politics in the UK. And again, it would be a fantastic move forward. But if you're on the left and you don't like the current direction of Labour, the only way you can really help chart another different course is by joining Labour and accepting you're not going to get everything you want. But as I've said this before, and I will hammer it in constantly until it gets into people's heads, you can get more done with a foot in the door than both feet outside it. So, as always, thank you for watching. Please do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And of course, down below there is links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link as well called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy me a coffee. And thank you to all the people who do support the channel either through my Patreon or buying me a coffee every so often. Like I say, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.